Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm joined by John Paul Mason. And it seems like only 5 minutes ago that I was chewing the fat with you about the poor Abada decision last night, because you and I were indeed not at the game last night. JP, we were at the Usher Hall in Edinburgh.
I mean, sometimes you have to do other things, and that's 2 Celtic games this week I've missed, so I'm sure there'll be plenty of people calling me a part-time supporter, but sometimes you can't do everything. And I was working a gig on Saturday in Edinburgh, so I resorted to watching it on my phone. And last night I couldn't even do that because I did find out though about maybe 10 minutes before doors at the gig that Celtic were doing a pay-per-view thing. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, apparently. I mean, I didn't get my act together because the phone that I was using is obviously the same device that I used to sell the merchandise at the gig that I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't exactly sit and watch a game whilst selling merch. So, but apparently it was like $12.99 and you could get it pay-per-view, even if you were in the UK.
I think that's a good move. I did see an advert maybe for the St Johnstone game. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a good move because, I mean, the game officially was a sellout last night. Obviously, you see that not everybody can make it for various reasons. And I'm in the Usher Hall going to see one of my favourite bands, McGuire. And I go up to the merchandise stall, and there you are with the earphones in, listening to the game. And I could see the green and white hoops underneath your jacket and just at the top. And I just thought, there he is, representing. Absolutely superb.
It's a bit of a superstition when I'm not when I'm at a game, I wear a home top. When I'm at an away game, I wear an away top. When I'm not at a game and Celtic are playing, I wear a home top if we're at home, and vice versa away.
Love it.
I feel bad though because I think I cursed us for the St Mirren game because I wore.
You did?
I didn't wear that grey top that day. I think I wore a home top that day, and I think I put a hex on us that day by not sticking to the. I mean, it's nonsense, but I didn't. I think I did that.
I'm pretty superstitious. I don't think it is nonsense. But to be fair, when you mentioned the top you were wearing and you mentioned St Mirren, I thought you were talking about the jersey we wore that day because you have worn it on the show before. And
I wore it when I was over. I think I was over in Spain. It was when I was over for my mate's wedding in Seville, and on the way there, I had that grey top with the luminous, and I wore it while we were playing Shakhtar away, and we got the draw. But then on the way back, I wore a home top, and we were playing away, and we got beat 2-0. So I take my share of the blame for that.
Superstition. I mean, last night there was nothing about superstition. We'll get into the action all around last night. I've just got to say though, I was pretty gutted that I wasn't there to see in person, or hear rather in person, the song getting played, the charity single, the Glory and the Dream. And you know, you've played a part in this, JP, because Paul Sheridan is someone that you have known for many, many years. I didn't know Paul. He's been introduced both by yourself and Lawrence Connolly, and Paul's band The Wakes have obviously re-recorded his song. There's a great story behind it. And last night they played it over the tannoy at Celtic Park. What a proud moment. And hopefully they're going to be playing it again this Saturday before the game against St Johnstone. So it was tremendous to hear that. And if anybody was at the game who heard it, let me know what you think. It's quite incredible as well, JP, that there's certain elements of that song. For example, the backing vocals, Carly couldn't make it along to the recording studio. So we brought her in here, into this studio, and we got her just to sing into that mic. So the backing vocals that you heard over the big tannoy at Celtic Park, we actually just recorded them in here, and then we got the producer to layer them into the song. But you would never have known, obviously. It's one of the highlights of the tune.
What number is it currently at?
I've not checked today. The high point so far was 16, and then it dropped down the charts for various reasons. It's been a sad day for music, a sad week for music, JP. So loads of other songs were entering the charts, and we ended up dropping out of the top 40. We were at one point in the top. We were number 1 in the rock chart on iTunes. And we just hope as the week develops and various other people get behind it that it can climb up. The ambition at the beginning of the week was to creep into the top 40. We wanted it to be in the top 40 by Sunday. Let's see what happens. If you fancy downloading it and supporting St Mary's, then the download link is underneath this video. We will play it at some point during the show as well, because that has now become a tradition on a Celtic State of Mind. It was tremendous to hear it being played over the tannoy. Loads to discuss, JP, and even though you weren't able to watch the action live, and since then you've been extremely busy setting up the band's gig for tonight at the Barrowlands, there's various things we can discuss about last night. Let me know what you think in the comments field. Wasn't what you would describe as a vintage performance, but I don't think we've been getting vintage performances. Or is it more to do with the fact that we're not turning the opportunities into goals? I'm going to start off with Tony Ralston. Tony Ralston last night, right? So we'll come to Ange, but he was talking about the amount of times we were zipping balls into the box, JP, and we're just not converting it. And it's not been a feature of just last night's game. I think it's been a feature of, we beat Aberdeen 1-0. We got 2 last-minute goals to beat Dundee United 4-2. We beat Motherwell 2-1, Ross County 2-1. Things have been pretty tight, and when you look at the possession and you look at the chances created, they shouldn't be tight. And that's beginning to be a frustration. And I think Ange kind of touched on it last night as well. But I want to talk about Ralston and the importance of Tony Ralston. Even though we have 3 right-backs at the club, at the moment only one's available to play. And he got injured last night. He had 2 very good chances at goal. He was involved in both goals. I often think he's more of a direct player. He was kind of like old-fashioned. He likes to hit the line and get the ball in, JP. And it might be a forced change because he was injured last night. But just how important has he become once again through circumstances beyond any of our control?
Well, particularly this month and the next run of games, because, well, I don't know if Jaranovic, does anyone know when Jaranovic is due back? Like, how long does he get off? I think they said they gave every player a week off after the World Cup. That would mean that you would expect him to be back maybe Monday. Well, wait a minute. No, Monday's Boxing Day, isn't it? I don't know.
Maybe back for the Hibs game, maybe?
Potentially, yeah. So he could come back into contention of that, but then we've got the game at the weekend. I would be keen to know from anybody that was at the game or watched the game how Taylor did when he got moved over, because is that what happened last night? Taylor got moved over right back, and Bernabe came on. Well, listening to Stephen and Melly's recap on 20-Minute Tims, they said that Bernabe was not good last night. But then a number of players I don't think were good, but Bernabe didn't do himself any favours last night. But I'd be interested to know how Taylor did on the right, because I don't think, has he ever played there before?
No, it's a good, this is the issue, JP, because I remember the game against Rangers, the semi-final of the Scottish Cup, and there was, in extra time, there was a scenario where it was a real makeshift defence, and when you're playing players out of position, it doesn't really do them any favours. And we were in a situation for a spell where Ralston was playing left-back and Welsh was playing right-back, and I know he has played there at kind of like youth level for Celtic, but the whole balance was wrong. And I think the issue last night, before even looking at the specific players, I just think the balance was wrong, JP. Now, I would rather play a full-back. Like Jaranovic switched to left-back last season, I would rather play a full-back on the side that is not his preferred side than play a centre-half at right or left-back, because full-back, it's not a specialist position in terms of a goalkeeper is really the only specialist position, but I just think if you can play left-back, you know how to play right-back, but to how great effect. So you've got Bernabe playing in his natural position. The question probably is, have you been that impressed with him? I know that he's, dribs and drabs in terms of his performances, and I know there's a few people in the comments section who are not convinced with his defensive qualities, but that's why he came to the club, to push Taylor for a jersey, and obviously he might get an opportunity that we'll talk about. I think a lot of Greg Taylor's offensive play has been on the right-hand side. You do see him switching over to the right-hand side a hell of a lot. So I think he might be comfortable there. JP, I'd maybe be more concerned with our left-back now, if that is going to be the case.
But you think we were covered well in all areas, but as soon as somebody drops, you suddenly go, wait, this is not as good a situation as maybe we thought it was. So but I don't know how serious Ralston's injury is, if he's going to make the weekend or not, because I don't know how bad his injury was. There was a number of things, because I read Ange's post-match thing where he said he's been in the wars tonight. He's had that, and then his back. His back's in pain or something. So
right.
I mean that's a lot of problems for one player. So you would maybe think that he'd probably need to be rested at the weekend.
Potentially, JP, because he went down in the first half and it was his left ankle that he was holding, and he looked a wee bit ropey, but then he was right into the action. And actually, we'll get to the goals in that, but when Livingston scored, and by the way, I'm not blaming Ralston because I'm going to talk about the play leading up to the goal, but Ralston was probably still feeling a bit the effects from the left ankle injury that he had obtained. You wouldn't know that in the lead up to Celtic's second goal. But it just as though, the ball, it doesn't quite trundle over the line, JP, but Ralston's just, I don't think he's got the pace to retrieve it. Whereas had he not had the knock by that stage, who knows? He then gets a second knock. So I know what Ange is meaning. But it's just interesting that the forgotten man, Tony Ralston, when Ange Postecoglou came in, became one of the most important players because he was the only right back for a spell. And now, even though we've got 3 right backs at the club, and Ange pointed this out last night, an injury to Tony Ralston becomes an issue. And I think that will come into the conversation when we start talking about the centre-forward position. Because all it takes is a scenario like last year, Boxing Day, St Johnstone, Kyogo goes off, Giakoumakis is already injured, Joey Dawson comes on. And we don't really want to be in that position at this stage of the season. But, this again is an issue. Who is your 19-year-old right back? That if there was an issue, you bring in from the B team. Who is that player?
Yeah,
he ready?
It doesn't seem that there's any obvious. Maybe somebody will come to the fore that we've not heard of that maybe get entrusted with the position, but it does seem unlikely that somebody would just get brought in cold from the B team. There doesn't seem to be a lot of. I mean, I've seen names being mentioned from the B team, and there was a couple of guys that I saw when I went to that B team game in January last year. I think it was. There was a guy called Brooks. He was a midfielder, I think. And obviously you've got Bosson, Lawal. He's been linked with moves away in January, if permanent or loan, I don't know. But you'd like to think that we've got people in the wings ready to come in and take a place, because it looks like we're going to need it. I mean, Alistair Johnston isn't going to be available straight away. I mean, is he going to come into contention for the game on the 2nd of January? Who knows? I would expect, and the whole question marks over Jaranovic as well. If like as we've always said, if his head's at the door, do you entrust him with a position in the team? Remember we played last season, we played Edward and Christie in the game against Rangers, and people questioned whether or not they were fully involved in that game. Edward misses that chance. It's strange to think that Edward actually played in a Rangers game under Postecoglou, because it doesn't feel like he did. And, well, to all intents and purposes, he didn't, because he didn't contribute anything and we got beat. But I don't know. I don't know about giving a place to somebody like Jaranovic. If there's a move imminent, and it seems to be the case, then that's you 2 right backs down. So you're Ralston potentially injured, depending on how he recovers, and Jaranovic head's not right. Johnson's just in the door. Does he just get flung in?
And you've got the Rangers, exactly, the Rangers game. And I know we're getting ahead of ourselves a wee bit, but you've got to plan like that. I mean, I'm looking at the squad there. We had a good discussion, John Hughes, Paddy Sinnott and myself on Wednesday, just yesterday. We had a good chat about the fact that, there's interest in Lawal, like you say. There's been interest also in young Ewan O2, who had a really good loan spell at Clyde last season. And I only know that because of the Clyde boys that used to be on the channel. They were raving about him. He was a standout. He can play in the centre or at left back. And there's interest also in Stephen Welsh. So that brings Stephen Welsh into the conversation. What I would do, because Welsh is a centre half who also plays right back, and that's his 2 positions. I would play him in a position that he is more natural playing in, rather than playing Greg Taylor out of position. Now, I'm contradicting myself a wee bit, because last season I was going on about Jaranovic playing left back, and I felt that was fine with Ralston at right back at that particular time. Now, Taylor's such an important player to us that I would much rather he was playing at left back and being as effective as he possibly could be. Stephen Welsh at right back, not ideal, but he can play there. And I would much rather a player playing in his position. And like the boys you were mentioning earlier for 20-minute Tims, I'm not convinced. So far, I'm not writing him off, but I'm not convinced yet with Bernabe. So I would rather take that. But Welsh has dropped right out of the squad in recent weeks as well, JP.
Well, he's been named as being injured.
Is he injured also?
When they asked him in the press conference, the two players they mentioned that were out were McCarthy and Welshy, as he called them.
He's out. Obviously, if that's what he said, he's been not in the squad. He's not listed as injured on this reference site. But if he's injured, then you do have an issue. Then you're playing guys out of position. And that's not ideal.
The only consolation we can take is that at least we've got a home game at the weekend and we're not away to, Dingwall on a Friday night or something like that. That you're putting players into the wrong position in a game like that is testing, I would say. So, not that I'm saying we take St Johnstone lightly. I mean, every game at the moment is littered with a bit of a banana skin, because I don't know. I just don't think we're playing as well as we have done, and therefore teams maybe think they can get. I mean, Livingston probably thought they were in with a chance at 2-1 down in that second half, and when I first logged on, just as McGuire were going on stage, obviously the merch quieting down at that point, so I was like, right, sports sound. This is my only way. So it was like 90s patter listening to it, and when I clicked up and I saw the score was 2-1. And there was like 25 minutes left or whatever. I thought this is a tightrope.
It really is tense, and we've walked that tightrope, JP, against Aberdeen. That was a game that Kevin McCluskey and I covered live. We did the watch along because it was part of the charity weekender. And when you look at the statistics of the game, the basic stats of the game, possession 81% in our favour, shots at goal 33, JP. Only 10 on target, and 7 corners against 0. So it's absolute domination. But the frustration grows, and the anxiety grows certainly from the Celtic perspective. And on the other side, as you were saying there, at 2-1 down last night, the confidence grows in the opposition, or with Aberdeen thinking maybe at that point their game plan has worked. The confidence grows, and then it gets really, really stuffy, and then the performances, I feel, suffer as a result of that. So I'm going to have a look similarly at the stats from last night's game, because they're kind of similar. It's all Celtic. It's constant Celtic pressure. Yet, we don't really get. Do we get what we deserve? Well, what Ange was talking about last night is we're just simply not converting it. Even if you just look at the law of averages, you have 33 chances, JP, you would expect to score more than one goal. Now, I think there's a few different reasons for that. The first one, and we'll get to this, is the nature of the man who's playing up top. But Ange was quite keen last night to take the onus away from that and talk more about players getting into the right position. So he wasn't focusing on Kyogo. He was just saying the players, we do it all week, the players aren't getting into positions, because the balls were coming across left and right. They were coming across all night, and we weren't getting into the positions. Now, as I said there, Livingston, Aberdeen, Dundee United, Motherwell, Ross County, all of those games were tight. We needed 2 last-minute goals against Dundee United. And I'm kind of hoping that it doesn't continue like that for the rest of the season, because then the title race is going to be tighter than we would like. What do we do to change that? Ange's already talking about making changes. Is it as simple as bringing in different personnel?
No, from the way he was talking last night and the little bits and bobs that I've heard, he's definitely going to ring the changes for the weekend. I don't know what that will mean, whether it's Haksabanovic coming in or maybe Giakoumakis starting, but then so many people were going on about Giakoumakis last night, saying, "Oh, he has to start. He needs more game time. It's terrible the way we're treating him," and as if he's some sort of outcast. But then he came on last night, and by all accounts, he didn't play that well. and Kyogo's the guy that's got you what ultimately is the winning goal.
Yeah.
And might not have got a hat-trick, he might not have hit the heights that we all know that he can hit, but it was a well-taken goal, and ultimately it was the goal that sealed the 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
So you can only really say that the striker does job. and in shock headline, striker does job, scores winning goal, but it seems to be not enough for some people. And I would persist with Kyogo on Saturday. I don't think we should drop him. I think he's scored the goal, he's done his job. Play him in the next game and see what he does on Saturday.
Well, there could be changes for changes' sake, JP. And I actually, this is the interesting one, because I had the chat last night just before the game with Lawrence. We disagreed because I was looking at how a player can grow frustrated. And when you're Giakoumakis and you're getting, like last night, he gets 8 minutes. And I was running through, the fact that...
Is that all he got last night? I didn't know that.
So he gets 8 minutes last night, JP. He's played 90 minutes on 4 occasions this season. So all season, he's only completed 4 games. And then when you look at the participation that he's had in many of the games where he's come on, it's 10 minutes, it's 20 minutes. Now, he's 28 years of age, he's a fully formed footballer that he's going to be. And if he's not playing games, my suggestion is that a frustration could creep in. Now, we all become body language experts, as we did in the season when we were going for 10 in a row, and we're looking at the sidelines and saying, this one's no interested, he doesn't get on with him. And we all knew exactly what was going on from afar. And I'm not really reading too much into Giakoumakis' body language. I'm just looking at his performances. And what I would say is he done enough to start the game? So you've got two things to look at. You've got Kyogo, who, he's missed a few chances, scores a winning goal last night, but has Giakoumakis really done enough to start a game on Saturday?
I wouldn't have said so, but maybe it is the case that he's, in a way, thrown his toys out the pram, and this is Ange Postecoglou laying down the law and sort of using him only on a sort of needs-must basis, giving him minutes just to give other players a rest. Mm-hmm. And maybe all this paper talk about him wanting away is actually true, and he wants to start every week. And this is the sort of softly approach of letting everybody know that he is actually going to go, and probably will go in January, because he's not come out and said anything in the press or anything. He's not. I think Postecoglou has managed to protect. Would you say protect the players? Not protect the players, but created an environment whereby that's not acceptable. I don't think that would fly in his world. Mm-hmm. So I think the way it's going to come about is that there maybe is frustration there, and that's how it's playing out, and that's what we are seeing as a supporter. We're seeing him being used sparingly because he's probably already indicated that he wants away. And Postecoglou said many times, as far as I'm concerned, everyone that's here is on call to play, and he gives that impression to the press and to the support, but privately there'll be different things going on. Jaranovic has asked for it. He's never said Jaranovic has asked for a move away. He's always said, he's our player, blah blah blah. But the noises you hear inside and outside the club is that Jaranovic has asked for a move away, and as soon as January. So, and that's why he's getting linked with likes of Barcelona and Atletico Madrid and everything else. Like those stories don't just come out of nowhere. I don't think there's too much about that to make you think that there's nothing in it. So that's probably the same with Giakoumakis as well. That he's maybe has grown frustrated, realised that if he's ever going to get a big move, this is the time. He's 20. He's 28. You've got to strike while iron's hot. And said before, I don't really have a massive issue with him or anybody at that age going, because we'll get optimum money. You'd like to think for a guy under contract we'd get somewhere in the region of 8 to 10 million for him, which is a profit on what we paid. Yeah. I don't think he's not going to go for crazy money, but I definitely think we could potentially treble or quadruple our money for him, given the evidence of what he's showed while he's been here.
Yeah, his data speaks for itself.
I mean, it's all about data now, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
that's how you sort of
Absolutely, JP. That's why Welsh has got interest from all over the place. I mean, how often is Toulouse or Udinese come and actually physically watch Stephen Welsh playing a game of football? I'd be surprised if they have done. But they're studying data, and they'll be presented with a short list of players that fit their criteria. Stephen Welsh scores really highly in a lot of the metrics, and he's coming to the fore. And it would appear that a lot of Scottish players are, because there seems to be this group of Scottish players at the moment going over to Italy, for example. And it's not only down to data, it's not only down to scouting, but for sure Stephen Welsh is obviously quite high in the metric data. So when we look at some of the suggestions that we're making, we're looking at a scenario, JP, and it's okay to say, this is what I can see and this is my opinion. I opine that Giakoumakis may be looking for a move. The thing with Jaranovic, which I find quite interesting, is that the way that agents or players get the message out is quite simple, because they can feed certain people stories, and the certain people they're feeding the stories to are regarded as credible sources. So, for example, when Fabrizio Romano puts something out on Twitter, everybody loses their minds, right? But he's just not come up with that. He's been fed information. He's got sources all over the place. And it was interesting at the beginning of the season that Romano was all over the Jaranovic speculation. And I think Celtic have actually played a blinder here. So even if, JP, as the suggestion has been made, even if Jaranovic wanted away at the beginning of the season, right? Maybe, let's just say that was the scenario. And it drops, and various sources, one being Fabrizio Romano, say that Jaranovic is gathering interest. I think it was Atletico Madrid and Chelsea initially. We've now heard Manchester United and Barcelona being linked. I think Celtic have played a blinder. So we've kept a first choice player for our Champions League campaign, which didn't work out the way we wanted it, but we kept the strongest team available, JP. We never sold anyone. We can't say that. And we've maximised his value by making sure we still had him during the World Cup. Then the January transfer window opens, and I honestly think Celtic have played a blinder on this one.
Well, Fabrizio Romano will be the first person to bring back that tweet when the move inevitably does happen. They'll be like, as stated earlier this season, and he'll have because he was quite cute with his tweet. He didn't say that it was imminent or anything like that. He just said, serious interest in Celtic's Josip Jaranovic. Expect a move to transpire. Nothing concrete, or I can't remember the exact detail, but it was hinting that something was, there was interest, and that's all he said. Mm-hmm. So when it does happen, you'll be able to go back and be like, mind I said that.
Yeah,
4 or 5 months ago.
I know. I bet he doesn't go back. In fact, he probably does go back and delete the ones that he got horribly wrong. There's a few people do that, in fact. And there's a few good suggestions I'm going to bring into play. And it's interesting how the modern game, sometimes we look at it, JP, and we think that it's unrecognisable from the game back in the day. But the more they change, a lot of the things stay the same. I've spoken to players back in the 70s who didn't have agents. And if they wanted a move, right, the one that I'm going to tell you about, Andy Lynch, obviously, I spent a lot of time with Andy, captain of Celtic, scored in the 1977 Scottish Cup final against Rangers, part of the 10 men winning the league team. Great career, brilliant career. And I think back to what he was telling me, so nobody had agents back then. I don't even think Dalglish had an agent, right? And what they could do is they had...
He didn't have an agent.
As far as I know, his father-in-law kind of helped him with deals. Mm-hmm. And so what then happened was, if you wanted to get the word out, JP, that you were unhappy or you wanted to move to England or something like that, you would meet a journalist that you'd maybe built a rapport up with over a period of time. You'd meet him in a boozer somewhere in Glasgow for a pint. You'd give him the story, and then it would break the following morning. But for his move to Celtic from Hearts, there had been interest from Spurs, for example. And Andy fancied a move down to England, and there'd been interest from Spurs. Hearts had played Spurs in a long-gone tournament called the Texaco Cup. And Andy had played really well in this game against Tottenham. And they were interested in signing him. At that point, he was a left winger. And then various different things happened, and he was in and out of favour, and he'd fallen out with people, in the highest kind of positions at the club and stuff. And the Celtic interest, which had come to the fore during the Spurs interest, had died down a bit. And he was like, "No, I fancy a move to Celtic." So what he did, he was travelling through to Edinburgh to obviously train on a daily basis. And there was a wee guy that used to sell the newspapers at the train station called Jimmy Flax, who was a pal of Jock Stein's. True story. So he spoke to Jimmy, he goes, "I put the word into Stein." And then a few days later, Flax says, "I expect movement next week, Andy." Next thing you know, Andy signs for Celtic. That's how it used to be. Like, no, I'm not saying people are going into Glasgow Central and speaking to newspaper salesmen, but the equivalent of that is an agent contacting a source. The source put it out there becomes a story. And again, I don't think that harms Celtic if we're willing to sell a player, because it gathers a wee bit more interest, doesn't it? Other clubs have now been mentioned in the race for Jaranovic. But in the meantime, I'm more concerned about who plays right back for Celtic on Saturday against St Johnstone. And I'm really keen to bring in some of these comments. We're asking the question, Ange hinted last night there's going to be changes. We've asked you what changes you would actually make. Celtic follower, welcome to the show. What is in that mug? Is that a Celtic mug? And what is in it? Let us know. I've been wondering. Must admit, I wasn't impressed with Jota last night, and Hatate and O'Reilly have looked a bit off. So I'd bring in Maeda for Jota, Turnbull for Hatate, and Haksabanovic for O'Reilly. Maybe switch Kulo for Gio. It does show that there are options to be had. And often, though, JP, I get a bit concerned when full-scale changes are made. Were you getting that vibe from what Ange said last night, or you just expect maybe 2 or 3 changes?
I think he's learned his lesson on the whole-scale changes from, what was the game? Well, it was the St Mirren game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
St Mirren game where it was, 6 changes or something like that? I think that's a bit extreme.
It's a balance, isn't it? It's really just the balance and the blend of players. It just doesn't fit.
I think he was saying the other day about, and it was something that a lot of people, mainly the obvious support, picked up on wrongly when he was talking about the different challenges and if why can people not differentiate between us and Rangers? Mm-hmm. It's just like, you're playing Celtic or Rangers and it's the same thing's going to happen every time. And he said, well, it's a different challenge in every game we play against teams. So last night was a specific challenge against Livingston, Saturday against St Johnstone. The game might flow differently for the likes of Hatate and O'Reilly and Jota. It might just be a different occasion and a different. They'll feel better about themselves on Saturday, or feel they have got a point to prove after criticism. The manager might see it in training and see a determination in them that they want to put right what was wrong last night if they didn't play that well. So I think it'll be about what happens between today and Saturday as to who he decides to switch out. I can't see him making that many changes, surely. I just think that's a bit too disruptive and a bit too manic to just change that all up as much as that. I think, especially when you're talking there about guys that are nailed on first team players. Jota is the first choice pick in that position. O'Reilly the same, Hatate the same, and we've seen with Hatate he can have not great games and then the next game he'll have an absolute worldie. Mm-hmm. So I like he said, I think every game is different and you can't. What's the phrase? Throw the baby out with the bathwater. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. You did, mate. No, but if you get it wrong, it's fine because Kev Graham and myself, I've got to say, normally put 2 things together and come out with God knows what. But yeah, you got that spot on. But it's like a midfield. If you throw 3 players in who haven't actually got that blend and that dynamic, I think it spells danger. I really do. And also, though, it wouldn't surprise me if Ange said that for a reaction from some players.
Oh, yeah.
So players will be waking up today going, right, am I one of the ones that he's maybe thinking about dropping here? And then there's maybe an increased intensity between now and preparations for the St Johnstone game. And managers do that, don't they? They are able to manage and motivate in different ways sometimes. Very unusual for Ange to come out and say something like that. But maybe that's what's required. Barry McCormack, another 3 points in the scoreboard and the champions move on. After a commanding performance, the team and fans seemed to get spooked when Livy pulled a goal back. I do want to focus on the goals, and that includes the Livingston goal, for sure, because I think that when you look at we'll go with the Livy one, seeing how it's been brought up here by Barry. When you look back on the Livingston goal, it was very scrappy. We've just gone 2-1 ahead, JP, and you think, right, get to half-time, and the complexion of the game might have been completely different. But what actually happened was Livingston put us under a wee bit of pressure after they kick off, and it's a bit scrappy, right? But there's a moment where Greg Taylor clears the ball, and it's a bit of a hit and a hope, right? So it just cleared high into the air. But from that moment, because I don't criticise what Taylor's done there, he's just getting out the area. From that moment, 3 times we lose battles. The first one's Kyogo, and if you watch it back, this is an old saying, but you could get a Rizzler paper under his football boots, right? He doesn't even make an effort to get... And I know Obalaye is a big, imposing presence, but Kyogo misses the first header, right? And that's where the problem starts. But by the time the ball gets through to Devlin, who scores the goal, O'Reilly loses out on a header, Starfelt loses out on a header, and the guy who's cleared the ball, Taylor, fails to stop the issue as well. The danger. So it's a collective, right? So it's easy to say it's a scrappy goal and it's a soft goal, and it is. But if any of those 4 players wins their individual duel, wins their individual battle, that goal's not scored. We get to half-time and that's fine. And I think that's what it comes down to. Just that wee bit of complacency, JP. Did it spook them? I've seen various performances. For example, Dundee United. I felt that the penalty kind of spooked us as a team, and it took us to the very end of the game for us to regain that composure and win the game. We done enough to win last night, but that did concern me a wee bit, because it was, you just win that battle and Livingston don't score before half-time.
Was it not, I read or heard someone say, I can't remember where, in recent times, that not usually that there's like an average of 3 mistakes that lead to a goal. So
right.
like you said, there's 3 things that happened there, or even more, that led to the opportunity. So if 3 people are falling down in their role and they don't carry it out, then the likelihood of a goal coming from it is going to be more, because there's not just one mistake. It's not just someone slipping, like a certain Liverpudlian midfielder did once. But if there's a collective of 3 mistakes, it's an average of 3 mistakes that'll lead to a goal.
There you go. Yeah.
Yes, the stats boffins will have a better grasp on that than I. I still don't understand a lot of that stuff, but
that makes sense.
It's a contributing factor.
Totally. And I guess that the higher up you go in terms of the standard they play, if you go to the Champions League, one mistake can spell danger. But in a game against Livingston, you're not going to get too many individual moments of brilliance from the opposition, right? No disrespect, that's just the way it is. So if you make one mistake, I'm not expecting one of their players to pick it up 35 yards out and either strike the ball in the back of the net or go on a mazy or whatever. And that's not what happened. It was right, there's the mistake. Kyogo's missed out in the header. That's the start of it. And as I say, O'Reilly misses a header. They've gained 10 yards. Starfelt should clear it. He doesn't. And then it's basically a battle of the wits between Taylor and Devlin, and Taylor misses out. And then you think to yourself, you're then relying on a tremendous save by Joe Hart, which is basically a one-on-one. Or you're relying on Tony Ralston being 100% to get back and stop the ball from going into the net. So yeah, that was the disappointment for me, because it was uncharacteristically soft when you watch it back. Martin Kay thought Turnbull looked a little off it. Right, I'm bringing that up because there's a few comments on Turnbull. Turnbull is never on it these days. Stephen McGonigal. I don't disagree with these 2 comments, but what I would say in defence of Turnbull is a wee bit like the Yakimakis one. JP, where's he going to get that stride? Where's he going to get into the rhythm? Because he's not really getting the minutes, is he?
I think he's become a bit of a fall guy, isn't he? People are not fully convinced by him, and maybe it goes back to the whole, we signed him from another Scottish club, therefore he's not got that kind of pizzazz about him and doesn't get the sort of doesn't get the leeway that other players get. I think he did, but the thing is, he set quite a high bar for himself at the start under Ange Postecoglou, where he was playing every game, and was a mainstay in the side, and then when a player kind of goes out of the side and the players that are in his position do well, and he comes back in and doesn't quite hit the heights, then it's kind of, a lot of people tend to think, oh well, he's no use to us, get rid of him, which is the harsh nature of supporters, I suppose. But maybe he'll get a chance on Saturday to play. He'll be one of the ones that comes in. Say there's 2-3 changes, maybe Turnbull comes in. I mean, Ange Postecoglou clearly likes him.
He played every game, right up
to
that.
He's got a nickname for him, so I don't know how much that means. But
what is it? The Bull?
The Bull.
Is it?
He just calls him the Bull.
The Bull, brilliant. He played every game under Ange, right up to the semi-final against St Johnstone, the League Cup last season. So he was a go-to. And then what happens is, by the time he gets fit, O'Reilly and Hatate are in the team, right? So it's going to be difficult. And then it's kind of like you're trying to make an impact in the 10 minutes. It was only yesterday I looked at Giakoumakis, the actual minutes that he was getting. I know that he can be an impact striker, Giakoumakis, but sometimes 10 minutes is just never going to be enough to let you get into the game. And I feel a wee bit of that with Turnbull, leading up to Abada's goal that, again, we can touch on as well. Turnbull's impeded. He's fouled. They play, they call play on, but he did pretty well at that point. But I do get it. I'm just trying to defend some of these guys because it must be hard to, without half a dozen games, to get into your rhythm. Here's the thing, Daniel. You'll need to enlighten us on this one because I don't know about you, JP. I don't have an Instagram yet, but I will. Okay, I will get an Instagram. Apparently, there has been some posts on Giakoumakis' Instagram today, and it's not looking good, according to Danielle. So let us know what it is he's saying. Now, I think the last time I got into the Instagram chat was Julien, and obviously that ended up with the player leaving. I don't know how I feel about it. I remember also, I think it was last season, I said the first thing that Ange needs to do with Griffiths is ban him from social media, right? And I get that players regard themselves as brands, JP, right? I get all that. And there's sponsorship and there's engagement, which is massive. And you look at what Rashford has done with his social media platform, etc. So I know that there's positives. But I sometimes feel that the negatives really outweigh it. I really do. And I also feel that level of engagement, you could get that from official club channels. So players could engage via official club channels in a controlled environment. I'm not sure I'm happy with the, finding things out about the future of a player's career or the way they're feeling on the socials.
No, I don't like that either. I think, I get that there's a temptation to broadcast everything that you're thinking or doing on social media, and a lot of people do that. Some people just tweet anything that they think, the first thing that comes to their head, if they're feeling up, down, left, right, whatever, they just put it out there, and you're like, whoa, that's a bit much to hear from someone, but they just see it as a space where they can put things out there. But then I think when you are someone who has probably got, I don't know how many thousand followers that Giakoumakis has got, but it's a lot. It was a lot more than you or I could have. And I think when you've got that kind of audience, I think you need to be a bit more careful with what you do, especially if you're under contract as a football player. I think it's slightly disrespectful to be putting stuff out. I mean, can you imagine what Di Canio and Cadetti's Instagram would have been like back in the day? They would have been going full all guns blazing at Celtic, for their disagreement with what they were doing with regards to their contract. So I'm not a fan of it. I'm not surprised at all that Julian's Instagram story was deleted almost as soon as it was up, but it doesn't take much to screenshot something and then put it up there, and then everyone knows that it was there, and you kind of end up looking a bit foolish. I just think it lacks a bit of professional. I don't know what it is. It could be something. I mean, obviously, Daniel said that it's something to be concerned about or doesn't look good. So whatever it is, you would expect it to be something that's pointing towards negativity or heading out the door, or something like that. It's a bit of a minefield and I don't think that will go down. If he has put something up, I don't think it will go down well with the manager or the club.
No,
really.
it won't. It won't go down well with Ange. I mean, whenever he's asked about aspects of technology and all this kind of stuff, he always
He hates it. Aye,
he pins his colours right to the mast about that. But yeah, it's a difficult one because, as I say, I try and look at things and say, right, where's the positives? And some of the examples we've used there are positives with social media for footballers. Of course there are. But there are a lot of negatives. And when things are going bad and people's in that headspace, like you say, JP, and they're putting something out there, it's like, what you hoping to achieve from this? It's not a good look. Let us know, Daniel. Let us know what Giakoumakis has put out.
He said it Scott Robertson.
Was that when he was asked? Yeah, yep, absolutely.
And they put it to him and said, "Oh, he's been in the papers saying, he'll be needing to leave and all the rest of it." And then Postecoglou kind of just went, "I don't really think he should be in the papers saying that sort of thing." But he then went on to kind of confirm that his career at Celtic was probably over. Mm-hmm. I mean, reading between the lines, he didn't say it in black and white as such, but you didn't have to be a genius to figure out that from what he said, it was not looking good for him in terms of his Celtic career. And certainly, having been told by the media that he's been in the media talking about leaving Celtic,
I know
that's not good for him really. And I don't think Postecoglou was at all happy about having to address that. Just the same way as if someone brings up in the presser ahead of Saturday, they might bring up the Giakoumakis Instagram thing. You'll see what he feels about that when he has to speak about that, if he does.
We're talking about body language experts earlier on, and I'll tell you something, you don't have to be an expert to read Ange's body language at times, so he'll make his feelings known. You mentioned a couple of the guys, like you say, if they had Twitter back in the day, your Cadetti and Paolo Di Canio, I think Van Hooijdonk would have been up there as well. But I remember a story I was told, JPA, from Tom Campbell, the phenomenal writer of Celtic history. He wrote The Glory in a Dream for the centenary season, the book, which is a fantastic history. And he told me that Tom being Tom, he's actually based in Canada, but he decided, I'm going to go and try and get an interview with Fergus McCann. So he found out where Fergus lived. And he went up to this place and he was describing it to me. He was on the side of this kind of mountainous area, and he says down the bottom there's actually a tavern. There's a tavern at the bottom of this windy road which leads up to wherever Fergus McCann's property is, right? He says, and the tavern is called the Three Amigos, right? And he said it crossed his mind. He thought, I wonder if that's where he got the terminology. The pub down the bottom of the road at Fergus McCann's is the Three Amigos. And of course it was him that called those three players the Three Amigos. Just while we're taking a wee deviation, I'm going to bring this up. I did mention it yesterday, but it's relevant to you, JP, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is one of 12 signed 7-inch vinyl records that were sent to us by Kevin McDermott. It's the Kevin McDermott Orchestra. The song's called Everything Is Over. They're all signed, by the way. And these were, I don't think they were released, I think they're promos. They were promo singles from 1991. Brilliant gesture by Kevin. He's asked us to include them in our auction, which I'll be working on actually next week. There's been a few people asking about that. We've got some great stuff. Going to be putting it up on eBay. But you bumped into Kevin McDermott, didn't you?
Yeah, just in the road, in Great Western Road. He came up and went, "Oh, you're that laddie for Celtic State of Mind." Oh, and actually a couple of people, a guy who's been watching for quite a while came into the music hall in Aberdeen. The guy called Barry McGuire came in to say hello because he knew I was there. And,
I recognise the name.
Yeah, he said that to pass on that he really enjoys the show and
brilliant.
Watched it for I guess like a couple of years maybe, or a year and a half, and then serving a guy last night at the merch desk, and he saw the Celtic talk first, and he was just like, "Oh, you had the score," and then he went, "Oh." And I was like, oh God, here we go. No, because like I get slagged for folk noticing or folk recognising me. Like some of my pals are just like, "Oh, you're famous in Glasgow," and I'm like, "Did they do this to be famous in Glasgow?" Just did it to chat rubbish about Celtic.
Celtic and a wee inkling of music. There is going to be, I've got to say, there is going to be a wee bit where we play at the end of the show, The Glory in a Dream, and I have been playing it on repeat, I've got to say. JP coming in and out of the studio. It takes me about an hour to get in the morning. At night time, it's a wee bit longer, unfortunately, to get home. And every so often on that city bypass, there was this vehicle. I'm not into cars and vehicles, honestly. You know what I mean? As long as it gets me there. So I couldn't tell you what it is, but it's one of these. It's got this trailer in the back, right? Mm-hmm. And across the back of it, and I've seen it kicking about, whoever owns it has spray painted in blue spray paint, RFC, hashtag number 55, right? And you've got two Union Jacks, seriously, flailing in the wind. And I've seen it, and it's passed me so many times, and there's been an occasion or two where I'm just driving along, doing what you do in the morning, listening to podcasts or whatever. And this vehicle has, been going at the same pace as me, but on the right-hand lane. And I know who it is, and I don't have a wee look. But the other morning there, playing the old Glory in the Dream, I thought to myself, there he is. There he or she is, 2 or 3 cars ahead of me. And I thought it would be interesting just to, let them hear the new tune. So I was driving up, and as soon as I got anywhere near, man, you should have seen them darting in and out of lanes to get away from me. It was as if they didn't want the banter back, So I have been listening to the song on repeat, and it's a grower. I love my music, so do you, JP, and it's one that I think in time it kind of gets under your skin, and I think that's down to the changes. So when you do the monologue, when you hear the monologue, and all the energy comes back down, and then the drum beat comes in as Paul's walking up St Mary's up to the altar, and then when the final choruses come in and Carly's backing vocals are added to that, it's quite, you get a bit of a lift from it. So
did the original ever get released, or was it unreleased?
It was unreleased, and I do have the original demo, which maybe we'll play at some point on one of the shows, because I could bring it up and play it. And the original demo, written by J.J. Gilmore and Gary John Kane, was far more of a folk song, right? They had it in their mind that they wanted Christy Moore to sing it. J.J. did, at least. And they were in discussions with Celtic, and Kevin Kelly wanted Richard Jobson to sing it. Right. And JJ was up for the debate, because he certainly wasn't wanting to be the final voice on it. But obviously it went back and forward to the point where Celtic didn't take it on, and it just lay there gathering dust until now. But
they took on the Celtic Rap instead.
They did.
We're number one without a doubt. I can't remember the lyrics, but it's so bad.
It's shocking.
He's Frank McAvenny, and you know he's going to score.
Oh, it's terrible, man. I mean, see, I do remember the Anfield Rap, right? So I get why the board are going, wait a minute, that's hot at the moment, let's go for that, and we'll do a rap, right? But come on, I mean, even the pictures on the back of the records, which we've spoken about this before. I bought the records at Falkirk Market, which was behind Coasters, right? And on the back, all the Celtic players, like, their caps have been turned to the side, which automatically makes them rappers, obviously, right? And it's just so cheesy. It's terrible.
There was a spate of that in the sort of late 80s because of the Beastie Boys and all that. It was
absolutely
Beastie Boys, and remember there was Morris Minor and the Majors. Now that's really good.
I do remember that.
First 7-inch singles.
Is it?
It was a guy called Tony Hawks, not the skateboarder. There's an English comedian, Tony Hawks, who came up with this novelty single, Stutter. It was Stutter Rat.
I remember it.
Morris Minor and the Majors, and it was all that kind of like, wearing the chains, and I suppose it was like Goldie Looking Chain long before Goldie Looking Chain.
And then Run DMC collaborated with Aerosmith as well, so there was a crossover.
Yeah, it just became a kind of fad, and obviously Celtic decided to buy into that fad, and at the expense of what is a really good song, which is far more in keeping with the club and what the club's all about. I mean, I could imagine Christy Moore doing that monologue. You could imagine them delivering that.
I know, I might ask him. I will play, I don't have it to hand, but I will play the demo at some point. Now that people know what the vibe of the song is, I will play the demo at some point, and you might look at it or listen to it rather and think it's a completely different song. It does sound completely transformed. I mean, Paul and the Wakes and Carly have done a great job, as has Ross Saunders at Glowworm Studios in Glasgow. Brilliant job, everybody involved. And then of course Icon, the guys who filmed the video at 7 o'clock on a cold, Sunday morning or Monday morning, whenever it was. Yeah, it is Lawrence Conley who is appearing in the video wearing a Celtic fleece zipper, in case you were wondering. Martin Heaney. How you doing, Martin? 3 points gained, but a poor second half. Yeah, it was. I watched the game in full this morning on Celtic TV just so that obviously I didn't want to miss anything. JP and Susan Finlay, you're back in. Best bulletin of the week. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas to you both and all that Axel. Well, hopefully we'll see you, Susan, at Gracie's. I think it's a January gig you're coming along to, so we'll see you then. And Paul Cook, afternoon, Paul and JP, got to love a Thursday bulletin. We do love it. And Kevin Graham is asking if you're going to beat the Barras tonight.
I kind of have to be, Kev. I don't have a choice. I think that the common misconception is if you do this sort of thing that you get to see the gigs and everything. I've not seen either of the gigs this week. So I was in Aberdeen. It was in Aberdeen on Tuesday. The merch stall was in the foyer right next to the doors. So every time somebody went out for a cigarette, doors were opening and then they stay open for like 20 seconds. So all the heat was going out at the reception. So I'm sitting, it's not glamorous. I was like sitting shivering in the reception in Aberdeen Music Hall. And then last night in Usher Hall, same again, you saw where I was. Nowhere, well, next to the gig, but not in the gig. And you can't just, the whole point of being a merch seller is that you're there the whole time so that if anybody pops out to the bar and decides they want to get a t-shirt or something when there's no queue, then they come over and you're there. So I saw 4 minutes of the gig last night. I mean, it's not like I've not seen Mogwai before, but there's going to be two of us tonight and tomorrow selling. So I'll hopefully get away to see some of the, well, hopefully most of the show tonight at the Barrowland, because I've never ever seen Mogwai at the Barrowland, and it's kind of a match made in heaven, really. The two, the band and the venue, and they love playing it. So, and I'm sure they've played it a lot, many times. It's just every time they've played it in the past, I've either been working or been away or something like that. So yeah, I will be there, Kev. So come and say hello at merch.
Absolutely. I've seen them once at the Barras. I was talking to my brother last night about this because we tend to go to a gig in December because our birthdays are 6 days apart, and we'll go. And as life gets in the way.
Your birthday last Thursday?
Yes. Was it?
On the show?
The 15th. Yeah, it was.
But I didn't even know or realise. Like, people were commenting, like, I saw some comments going, "Happy birthday, Paul," and I was like, we didn't talk about that at all.
I don't know how people know it was my. I don't count anymore. In fact, I've started counting backwards. When I hit 40, I've gone back. I'm now 36.
Minus 2 because of COVID as well.
Oh, I know. I removed the 2. Definitely. But I always used to say to my brother, we're the same age for 6 days every year. Mm-hmm. And in my juvenile mind, I thought that made you a twin, right? So you're 6 days a year, you're the same age. So by the time we're 62, we'll have been the same age for a whole year. That blows my mind.
Has
Danielle,
he got a Mogwai tattoo? Did you
he does. He's got it on his forearm. But by the way, it was me that got him into Mogwai, JP. The song that they closed the set to last night was the first. It was like a single. It was a 12-minute single. It wasn't eligible for the charts. And I remember playing that to my big brother. He was like, "Nah, not into that." And now he's like the #1 fan. Danielle F. How many balls did we have to watch get flashed across the 6-yard box last night with no takers? The reason I bring this one up is it's a good point, first and foremost. Far too many is the answer, of course. But I was talking about this yesterday before the game, JP, right? And sometimes we get too hung up on specifics, probably when it comes to data. And it's like, sometimes the old cliches have been lost. What kind of a striker? I asked Lawrence, right? We've got Giakoumakis, we've got Kyogo, two completely different players, and you would think they would be suited to completely different games. Like, for example, Obalaye, I think, put Giakoumakis up against them, right? But Kyogo scores a winner, so what do I know? What type of striker do we need, right? And it's easy to say, just one that, a fox in the box or a poacher or a 6-yard. Is it as simple as that? Well, yesterday I'm saying Moussa Dembele, bring back them. But we have brought in players previously, right, who maybe weren't that European standard footballer that we are striving to create or bring in. And Scott McDonald came in from Motherwell, scored 32 goals for Celtic. Lee Griffiths comes in, he scores over 100 goals, but in one particular season scores 40 goals, because Celtic always make a huge amount of chances, particularly domestically, JP. So the question is, what type of striker is it that we need? to convert these chances?
That's a burning question, isn't it? I'm sure Ange Postecoglou is currently figuring out the answer to that. I mean, I don't really know. I think Kyogo is a unique type of player. Giakoumakis, not so unique, but I think he's. I think Giakoumakis is a good player. There's no question, and obviously there was question marks over him at the start, but we don't really seem to have somebody that is absolutely making the shot their own and ruling out anybody else getting a shot. Kyogo obviously scored last night, and I'm kind of contradicting myself a little bit by saying, well, the guy did his job, he should play again on Saturday. But the Giakoumakis thing is obviously a case of there's a potential that he wants away, and there's nobody really that is being that kind of prolific, a Gary Hooper or a Larson, or there's not that many others that you could rhyme off. I mean, yeah,
Hooper's a good example. Hooper's another good example like that. I mean, I really like Gary Hooper, of course, but when you look at him coming in, he was prolific, but he was prolific for Scunthorpe and it cost us £2.5 million. Comes to Celtic, he becomes a 25 to 30 goal striker. So sometimes I just think to myself, you can tie yourself up in knots. We need a striker that plays a certain way. Somebody last week said Albion Ayeti fits that mould. But Albion Ayeti doesn't score goals and he barely runs. And I just think that, there's going to be a lot of options out there, JP. Back in the day, you would always have, and I know things are changing, but you would always have a young kid that you would be reading about every week in the Celtic View, banging in goals, and inevitably they would break into the side. We don't have any of that. We just don't have it at Celtic at the moment.
I saw a tweet last night saying there was some kid that had scored a crazy, I don't know if it was a real tweet or if it was wrong, but I think he was like 14 or 15 and he'd scored some crazy amount of goals in like 100 games or something like that, and he was only like 14 or 15, and it was honestly he must have been averaging about 3 or 4 goals a game at whatever level he was playing at. But you're right, we don't have anybody like that. We don't have somebody that's that name that's sort of jumping out every week. Like you said, in the Celtic View, there was always Mark Burchell was a name that everybody was familiar with. Aidan McGeady was a name that everybody was familiar with. There was always this chat of, there's these guys coming through, and I don't know why strikers seem to be the position where we don't get any joy with. Everywhere else in the park seems to will produce a midfielder every now and then. Cal McGregor will produce a defender every now and then. Kieran Tierney, but there's not, like you said, there's not been a striker that's come to the fore for a long, long time.
Many's a year. Let us know in the comments or indeed underneath the video, who is it we're looking for? Give us some names. And I know we've been linked with strikers, but it would be interesting. Is the answer already in the squad? I know Haksabanovic, Abada, Maeda, they can all play up top. I've not seen enough to know that if any of them are clinical enough to be scoring the goals. It's been an absolute pleasure, JP. I know that it's been a quick turnaround from last night for you, so I really appreciate you being on the show as always. And I'll say it again, I love a Thursday. It's great catching up. We did chat a wee bit about music. We're going to leave you with a wee bit of music at the end of the show, and it is The Glory and the Dream. We rocketed to number 16 in the iTunes chart on the day of release. We were number 1 in the rock chart, but it has kind of started dropping back down the charts. Can we pull it back up for a strong finish, a wee bit like Celtic against Aberdeen at Pittodrie? I hope so, because if we are able to do that, then we will inevitably make more money for the charity, which is St Mary's in the Carlton, the birthplace of Celtic. I'm going to leave you all with The Wakes featuring Carly Connor and The Glory and the Dream. If you fancy supporting our initiative, then download the track underneath. The link is underneath the video. Stream it on streaming services on repeat. That's what I've been doing on Spotify. And enjoy the track. All that's left for me to say is once again, JP Mason, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.
Over a century has passed since we first began our journey, across the sea to find the glory and the dream. Just a Taylor and a Johnny and a brother built our team. Greeted sometimes with hostility, but more often with delight. The boys who rise and had to clear through troubled skies. After constant days of struggle, they arrived in paradise. This feels like heaven. This must be the dream. This feels like paradise. The best we've ever seen. The best we've ever seen. Even through the lean years, our support would flock in thousands. Countless trophies stand displayed for all to view. Side by side, brothers, sisters, we're united, and our children do the same. This feels like heaven. This must be the dream. This feels like paradise. The best we've ever seen. The best we've ever seen. The above club was formed in November 1887 by a number of Catholics in the East End of the city. The main objective of the club is to supply the East End conferences of the St Vincent de Paul Society to support those in the missions of St Mary's, Sacred Heart and St Michael's. Many cases of sheer poverty are left unaided through lack of means. A football club will be formed for the maintenance of the dinner tables of our needy children. This feels like heaven. This must